Thank you. Arigato.
The Your Own Pay Podcast Network. Inspiring, motivating, and educating entrepreneurs around the world. It's Demasi and Michael, just talking tech.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is the Demasi and Michael Just Talking Tech show. And this week, we're going to be talking about the clouds. So many clouds. Before I get started, I want to introduce my co-host, the guy behind the Your Own Pay brand, Michael Babcock. What's up today, Mike?
Not the clouds, that's for sure today. The sun's out actually here.
Yeah, man. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Demasi. That's D-A-M-A-S-H-E. Link in the show notes at yourownpay.com/DM11. Man, Mike, we made it to 11 episodes. Give me your Twitter, Mike.
At Payom, P-A-Y-O-W-M. We're in double digits now. We appreciate you guys' feedback. Don't forget to leave a comment. Once again, yourownpay.com/DM11. What are we talking about today, Demasi?
Man, the clouds. And what we want to focus on with the clouds today is going to be cloud file storage. You know, keeping your files somewhere where you have access to them from everywhere. And that is the beautiful thing about the cloud. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how this used to be. And Mike, you can chime in at any time. I'll talk a little bit how this used to be. You got multiple devices. You know, sometimes back in the day, you had maybe a laptop and a desktop, or you had a desktop at work and a laptop at home, whatever the case may have been. You wanted to have your files on both of these devices. How did we used to do this thing back in the 90s and early 2000s? Man, you would get a flash drive, right? And you would plug it into this computer and copy the files to it, and then go to the other computer and plug it in and then copy those files off. Okay, that was okay. It was secure, at least. I mean, I can give it that. It was secure, right?
And that was after floppy drives.
Yeah, that was. I mean, man, I don't even want to talk about the floppy drives. Jeez, man, I had like a whole box of floppy drives just so I could take stuff from one computer to another. No, I don't even want to revisit those days. So then, you know, some enterprising people came up with some ideas. There was this thing called Microsoft Briefcase. I can't tell you about it because it never worked for me, but it was a thing, and it was supposed to sync your documents between two different Windows computers. But again, like I said, it never worked for me. So I can't tell you how it was supposed to work. I could just tell you it was a thing, and it was called Briefcase, and that's what it was supposed to do. So eventually at some point, people figured out, well, hey, we can build these computers and have all this massive storage, and then we can let people sync their stuff through us. And I don't think they were the first company to do it, but Dropbox was the first mainstream company, I think, that made cloud file sharing and cloud document storage a popular thing. You know, there are companies that have been around that have been doing it on the enterprise level for a while. Box.com is one of those. But Dropbox is the first cloud storage solution that I use, and it worked. I could put a file in the computer over here and boom, pull it up on this device over there. Mike, what other cloud services have you used in other ways of syncing documents before cloud storage came along?
Okay, so I've used Google Drive, and that's my big cloud sharing service, and that's what I love. Like Demasi, I got started with Dropbox, and I still use Dropbox for certain scenarios. But again, like Demasi, it was the first service that just worked. And I think that's really what made the impact on the end user is Dropbox, you installed it and you put files in a certain folder, and those files show up in any other computer or device that you've installed Dropbox and the folder is set up on. So I think that concept just made it really easy for people to understand. Before cloud storage, as I kind of joked around about earlier, we did move files back and forth via floppy disks, and then the whole thumb drive. My biggest issue with thumb drives is I always lost them. I could never hold on to them for longer than about a week or two. That was my biggest issue. So now that we've got Dropbox and Google Drive, which, as I said, I use Google Drive for different use case scenarios, I don't have to worry about losing a flash drive anymore, or breaking a floppy drive, or taking up all the room in my back pocket with different storage devices. The other thing that I really like about having the ability to store your files in the cloud is collaboration, especially when you're working on podcasts. As you guys know, I'm real big about podcasts, or if you're working on videos or putting different projects together, being able to collaborate and add a file to a folder and everyone on your team get access to that file instantly, I think is revolutionary. Now, Demasi, you mentioned Dropbox. I've mentioned Google Drive. Which one are you using and why? Do you use both? And my last question is, does someone have to pick between any of them?
So I do use both. I use both Dropbox and Google Drive. I use Google Drive mainly for stuff that I need to store for me personally. I don't do a lot of sharing with Google Drive, although I do have a couple of shared folders in Google Drive with some people inside of my current G Suite organization, and have one set up with Michael as well. Dropbox is the service I use for sharing files with people. It's very easy to generate a link and give them access to it, and the way that it comes up, they can click on it and download it or view it or whatever. It makes it very, very simple to share files. You mentioned the shared folders, which are amazing, being able to just share an entire folder. Anything that goes in that folder, everybody else sees. And as Michael mentioned, let me answer your other question. So do you have to pick? I would say you don't have to pick, but you may want to think about what you're going to do from a business standpoint. When you're looking at it for business, you only probably want to pay one company the bulk of your money. Which solution is going to be easiest for you and your team to get your work done? That's the most important thing. Maybe it's Dropbox, maybe it's Google Drive. There are other services out there as well. Box.com is one. iCloud Drive is a cloud storage, iCloud itself, but there's not really a whole lot of sharing and collaboration set up over there just yet. So I definitely would not choose that as a solution. Some things you want to consider before deciding on a cloud system. Accessibility. If you are blind using screen readers, as me and Michael do on a daily basis, you want the interface to your files to be accessible to you. You don't want to fight with that system. Another thing you may have to think about, depending on your business, your industry, is the security of your files. Who else has access to your stuff besides you? And the best way to figure this stuff out is go look at the terms of service. Go look at their privacy policy for Dropbox, for Google, for Box, for whoever you decide to investigate. Take a look at their terms of service and their privacy policies, because you don't want to put your client's files or your files at risk for using a service just because they were super cheap or they gave you a spectacular deal on, terabytes and terabytes of storage. You want to make sure your stuff is secure. You want to make sure it's accessible to you anywhere. And I mean that in both forms of the word. Accessible meaning you can get to it, and accessible meaning the interface is usable by you as well. So for me and Mike, as we both have mentioned, we both use Google Drive and Dropbox. I have found personally Dropbox to be a better solution for collaborating with other people who are not as tech savvy as I am.
Yeah, I found that to be the case too. I recently, as people who've listened to the podcast, followed my Twitter, and connected with me on Facebook know, been migrating everything from Dropbox and into Google, especially with my family. And I recently realized that it would have been easier to set Mallory up with Dropbox than Google Drive, just because you click it, you sign into your account, and it's set up. Google Drive, you have to accept some permissions, and there's one other step that we had to go through. But more importantly, and one of the other reasons why it may be necessary for you to implement both is integrations. 8 weeks ago, man, it was a long time ago, me and Demasi did a episode called DM3 Automation. And we talk about some of our favorite tools to automate what we're doing online. And maybe you're using some of those tools now. And if you are, I think it's important you take a look at those tools and see how you can implement using one of these cloud services, or even a different one, to store the results of your automation and or to acquire information to make your automation run. And as long as it integrates with Dropbox or Google Drive, there's some powerful stuff you can do that can provide some hands-off stuff. So, Demasi, do you want to give a quick glimpse into some automation stuff? Bring them back to the DM3 days.
So one example of using cloud storage as part of your automation workflows is the service that me and Mike both use, and anybody else that is handling a lot of audio processing may want to look into this service, and that is Auphonic. And there'll be a link in the show notes at yourownpay.com/DM11. So Auphonic is a service that handles audio processing, does some leveling, some cleanup of background noise. Definitely check it out. You upload your audio here, and what you do from there is you let it run its processes, and it can automatically save your files out to any place that you need them to go. So that could be Dropbox, that could be Google Drive, or if you're a podcaster, that could be Libsyn. Another automation example that I set up when my son was born, was to keep track of his feedings and his diaper changes the first couple of weeks, because you get them out of the hospital and you got to keep track of that stuff, because when you first take them back to the doctor, they're going to ask you all these questions. So set up a nice little workflow using Drafts and Dropbox, and set it up so that all we had to do was tap a button and choose a menu option and say, okay, this is a feeding. Boom, that gets saved to a spreadsheet that's in Dropbox, appended to the end. So all we had to do is go back and look, and we could pull it up for the doctor. This was an amazing workflow. It took me maybe 25 or 30 minutes to put that thing together, but man, we used it for like the first 2 months of his life because it made things so much simpler, and it was all built basically on the backbone of us having Dropbox as a shared repository for our files, so I could see them, Latia could see them, and everybody was happy, and the doctor thought we were super awesome.
And the best thing about it is you had access to that data anywhere. If your phone broke, if your computer broke, if Latia was at the doctor's office and you weren't there, she could pull up that information, you could pull up that information, and there was no more guessing. It's accessible anywhere. So that's all I have to say about cloud storage. Definitely take a look into it. Check out the terms of service and the privacy policies. Find out what fits your security needs, and reach out to us in the comments or on Twitter. We'll give you our Twitter in a minute, and let us know what you're looking for, and if you can't find it, how we can help you find it and get that figured out. So you can get those show notes and more information at yourownpay.com/DM11. I had to say it just to make sure that we're actually there. Hear it come out of my mouth. Yeah. And remember, you can reach out to me on Twitter at Payown, PAYOWN, with questions. He's
at Damashe, DAMASHE, and we'll see you guys next week.
You've been listening to Your Own Pay Podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, visit yourownpay.com/cast for exclusive content and to contact us today. We're eager to hear your thoughts and about how you're making this podcast your own. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon. The Your Own Pay Podcast, yourownpay.com.